been getting some new equipment, software, whatever, trying to make it better, but occasionally it doesn't quite work the way we planned or hoped that it would. So we're kind of still experimenting, bringing in new people. We have the director, the producer, the art designer, the creativity designer, all those types. We have to incorporate. So along with Ellen and myself. So it's a
You,
load.
you mean you mean me? That was all me, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah,
Pretty much.
yeah.
I kind of handle the large part of content, and Ellen handles the large part of pretty much everything else. So if
Yeah.
you're not happy with anything else, then holler at Ellen.
Yeah, if you don't like the thumbnails or anything else, and yes, thank you for mentioning that. New Trick 7, my donation link does work. I got it directly from Miss Hogue. I asked her to send me one that does work. They had trouble, I think, with Nightbot on their stream. That, however, Nightbot interpreted, or Nightbot is an actual bot, and the links that Nightbot had were not. They just were not working. So yes, please. Hogue is raising money for all the people that helped him with his brain surgery and his stroke and his recovery. And there is the link. I think it's the very top of all of this. And I think that Viking will keep posting it throughout. And so if you can donate, if you haven't already, please do. These people, and watch the stream that he did today. It was really great to hear from his doctors and the past, all of the series that he's done about his stroke and his recovery is fascinating and interesting to learn what all of these people have done to help him. So I encourage you to do so. I feel like we've been asking you for money for like 3 weeks. I apologize for that. Just a lot of things have been going on, but it's a worthy cause.
And that's kind of the cool thing about starting up this channel. And we obviously got a nice little boost of encouragement from Law and Lumber, and been kind of working with Ian and Rob on the secret thing. Is this is just kind of a little family. We really developed some close friendships with people over the internet. I talked a little bit last week of still how unusual that is to me. Developing close bonds with people that you've never actually met. Do hope to have the opportunity to meet you in the future, but I think that's just kind of cool. It is a little family, and we do try to help, everybody out.
And Quadi, yes, the doctor who actually did the brain surgery on Rick was on the video today. And that was pretty cool to see everything that he did. And he was actually about to go to lunch with his 75-year-old mother for her birthday. But yeah, he took the time. He spent quite a bit of time on the video today with Hogue.
And I think part of it is, to my surprise, I think people communicate better. I think people have an innate need to want to have fellowship and to be loved and to, form some bond with people that they are in similar situations or have similar interests to. And so maybe there's a little bit more willingness, one, to share information, and then two, to pay attention to it over the internet, texting, a few phone calls, whatever. So that is, that could be part of it. I can't completely figure out everything about the internet, but the relationships and the bonds are special, and I'd just be content with that. New Tricks. I love the community. It really is a community. There is the community at large. Then there are people who are regulars, who are faithful, who speak up, who we communicate with, and it really becomes more of a family, a friendship, and that's pretty impressive to me. Now, we did you say everything on give them the details on Hogue that you wanted to?
Yeah, and if you guys have any questions, please let me know, and Viking can repost that link throughout so that if you guys want to donate, I know he would appreciate it, not appreciate it, and Chloe would appreciate it.
Yeah. So we're very excited and pleased to be with you tonight. Appreciate y'all joining us. Look forward to continuing this fellowship. We're finally going to get back, and I debated on returning to some of the prior topics that we kind of stopped short on. Ran out of time, and then we were interrupted by obviously some of the events, the passing of Secret. That threw kind of a wrench into things. So we're back and thought about just moving on to new topics because there's obviously a lot going on in the markets and in the world. But I thought, there's just something about me. I like to finish what I started. And FTX, the topic we kind of stopped halfway on is a topic of pretty major interest to a lot of people. So thought I would go ahead and finish that up and then talk a little bit about the current banking crisis. And then as we have time, take a look at financial failures. What are, if any, are there some commonalities in the financial failures or crisis that we have? That would be good information for investors to know so that they could look out and understand how the financial environment, the financial markets, the economy is changing and adjust their investments accordingly, which the whole goal of this channel is to try to help you become a little bit more astute in terms of financial decisions, become a better investor. So last time we,
Can I pause you
actually
for
a
1
couple of weeks
second?
ago. Yeah.
Can I pause you for 1 second? KP, thank you for being here. I know you said you became a sub when you watched FNF with Rob. We appreciate you being here. And if you'll read the caption on the screen there, babe.
KP, I had a career in the financial services industry prior to becoming a lawyer. This is a strong area of interest for me. Appreciate the encouragement. Really do. It's obviously an area that I love. I've worked in for 40 years. And I think it ties so much into life because a lot of the decision-making processes we use in finance, we're actually making a value decision. We choose what we want to do with our money based on what we value. And if you look at it that way, most every decision you make is a trade-off. You make decisions based on values. What's important to you? For example, if you go to the store and you want bread, you go to the bread aisle and there's 50 different loaves of bread. So which one do you pick? Do you pick the cheapo white loaf? You don't really care, doesn't have real preference. The cheapest works just fine for you. Or do you buy the 49 different grain kind of breads, the handmade breads, pumpernickel, whatever? You've got all sorts of choices and all sorts of prices. Well, you make a decision ultimately on what you think is the best value for your money. And you do that over and over. I remember I was traveling overseas. I used to travel a fair amount. And I usually tried to bring my baby who's now 32, something from my trips. And she had started, her first job was actually as a Senate aide. And so she was, in the Capitol, had to wear heels all the time. And I thought, they saw these black pumps with the red soles. And I thought they were pretty. And I thought, I want to buy my baby a pair. Well, called up a shoe store and asked if they had them, locally. And they said, oh, no. You have to get them from this store about 90 miles away. And I thought, well, that was odd, but went ahead, called them, asked them if they had them. And the name was, oh, shoot, Louis Vuitton. And I probably massacred that. But anyway, so I asked, do you have these shoes? And they said, sure. And I said, okay, I want, do you have them in, I think her size was 6 or 7. I said, do you have them, those sizes? They said, yes, we do. And I said, okay, I'll probably run up and grab a pair. By the way, how much are they? And they told me $1,500. And I said, wait a minute, $1,500. I just want one pair. And they said, that is for one pair. Well, long story short, I didn't end up buying them. I love my baby. But I don't love her that much. So we went with another pair of shoes, another design. So value. Every decision you make is based on some kind of value or trade-off. The value today versus the value of something else in the future. And that's ultimately why we invest, to try to increase or better our future. And that's what we try to generally focus on. All right, back to FTX. Now, we started off talking about Sam, the well-known Sam, the dude who once said, my goal is to make an impact, quote unquote. And boy, did he make an impact. He he left an indelible mark on thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, an entire industry. I don't think it was exactly the mark he wanted to make, but his impact was sizable. Now, thanks to Sam, we were witnesses to the spectacular implosion of FTX. Let me do this. I thought it had it already set up, but I think it died on me. Let's see how that works. Yeah, there's the well-known lover boy. Yeah. This guy took a company from zero to a valuation of roughly $40 billion in 4 or 5 years. I would say that's kind of impressive, but ultimately fraud never impresses me. And I think that's kind of what FTX stood for, was fraudulent transactions. Because he really kind of screwed the pooch on that one. I can't even talk. All right. Well, the collapse of FTX came on the collapse of now FTX was renowned as a large crypto broker and money manager, quote unquote hedge fund. They self-proclaimed hedge fund. I just saw Viking Wolf's comment pop up. He needs a haircut. He looks like he needs a shower, shave, and a haircut. Maybe some manners too. A little dose of integrity. But nonetheless, he made history. Now, like I say, FTX, crypto broker, huge crash, huge collapse. Came on the heels of a collapse in another crypto called Terra and Luna. That was supposed to be kind of a stable coin that always held its value at $1. So you could use it kind of like a money market. Cliff Notes version. Well, Terra Luna collapsed. I mean, just died in a hurry. And FTX had a sizable amount of money in it. And then people started looking a little bit more suspiciously at crypto and crypto brokers. So I'm sitting over here looking at this picture, just still amazed. Does he look like the kind of guy you want to give a few $1 billion to? That's going to, Anyway, I'm judging his appearance, I guess. Something about unshaven, unkept people just generally don't impress me. If I'm going to give my money to somebody, I would hope that they would, at least be clean. Well, FTX collapsed, as we know. And there are, with every major change in the financial markets, there are winners and losers. Obviously, the winners with the collapse of FTX, Terra Luna and all, were the crypto skeptics. They had something to shout about, point fingers at, and go, this is all hokey. Binance, a well-known Chinese crypto broker, was obviously a winner. It picked up probably 80-90% of the volume in Bitcoin that FTX had handled. So a huge boost for them. And, as I've stated before, probably wouldn't do business with Binance. I think it's pretty much a fraud. I just saw the other day where they have been, one of their subsidiaries has been apparently, laundering or processing Russian transactions against, U.S. law and accessing the SWIFT network, all sorts of things. So that's going to end up being a big mess. Wouldn't be surprised to see another huge collapse there ultimately. Can't tell you when, can't tell you exactly how, but just have it in my bones that that's going to happen. Now, collapse of FTX, collapse of Terra Luna, obviously this ushered in what you could call a crypto winter. Bitcoin went from a high of 70,000 to roughly, I think it hit a low of about 16,000 in December of 22. That was about 2-3 months after FTX folded. But the most serious thing in my mind, the most serious problem or disadvantage for those who believe in crypto was the loss of support of the CFT, the Commodities Futures Exchange, or Commissions, FTC Commission. They had been a big supporter of crypto, even arguing against, contrary to the SEC's position, that it was not a security. Well, the head of the CFTC was a friend of Sam's. Now, obviously, that's blown up. He was pretty exposed, so their support may be fading. Hedgehog in space. Can you explain what the SWIFT network is? Yes, the SWIFT network is just the electronic network for international exchange of currency. Like if you want to transfer money from the U.S. to another country, somewhere in Western Europe, for example, that money would be transferred from your bank to a European bank, maybe to another European bank. Well, it'll be transferred from your U.S. bank, maybe to another U.S. bank or the Fed, then via SWIFT to European bank, to another European bank, finally to your branch where you get the receive the cash, pick up the cash, that kind of thing. So it's just an electronic transfer network. And President Biden decreed that, part of the embargo was that Russia would not be allowed to access the SWIFT network. So if there's some subsidiary of a company that does business in the U.S., and Binance does huge business in the U.S. that is violating U.S. law, well, that can stir up all kinds of mess. Our regulators aren't terribly efficient, but when they get them mad on, they can do a whole lot of damage. So we can look forward to see what happens. Let's see another question here. KP. Curious if you see a correlation with the CFTC between FTX and the mortgage crisis from 2008. That's an interesting question. I'll have to think about that one a little bit. I'm not sure that the Commodities Futures Commission had a whole lot to do with the initial damage of the subprime mortgage crisis, issuing or allowing or buying of subprime mortgages, which ultimately started the great financial crisis. It's now being called GFC 1, as if we're anticipating, or a lot of people are anticipating, a GFC 2. Isn't that interesting? But offhand, I'm going to say there's probably not, because I don't remember them being directly or even indirectly involved in subprimes. I can research that a little bit better and get you a better answer, but offhand, I'm going to say I don't think so. Now, if you want to go into the SEC, some of their regulations, I might be, more persuaded or more confident of a relationship. I do think regulations, and I've mentioned this before, I do think regulations oftentimes cause more problems than what they actually solve. The law of unintended consequences, whatever you want to call it. For example, the banking crisis we're having now. We'll talk about it a little more in a few minutes, but I think if bank managers were allowed to manage their own risk instead of following these 50 pages of rules and requirements and accounting gimmicks and tricks, that they would be much better managers, much more responsible managers. Hell, SVB didn't even have a risk manager for 6 months. When they hired one that had no concern about the bank's risk, but was more concerned about their diversity programs. So, and I'm not sure how diversity programs fit into risk management. Maybe it's just me, but I'm kind of old school. I care about cash flows. I don't care about the particular race, creed, religion, amount of pigment in a person's skin that's handling the transaction. So I think anything that takes management's focus off of cash and actual risk management is a problem. Not a big fan. Hedgehog, bad actors are able to respond to regulations faster than regulations are able to be updated, refined, patched. That's it in a nutshell. One of my favorite generals was George Patton. Commanded the 2nd Corps in Africa, then the 3rd Army in its march across Western Europe. Set all sorts of quote-unquote records for most territory covered in the fewest amount of time, lowest losses versus prisoners taken, enemy killed, whatever. I think he was a modestly brilliant, if crude, strategic general. But he said that fixed defenses regulations are a monument to man's stupidity. There is nothing, and I've seen it in finance, in trading, in derivatives over and over. The regulators don't have the sophistication or the understanding of the products they're even trying to regulate. Their goal ultimately is to not, oftentimes, I will say, not always, there's a few exceptions, but their goal almost always is to not piss off the people they're regulating because they hope to go to work for them in a couple of years. You look at the SEC, has all these attorneys who leave after being there 3 or 4 years, going to work for the law firms of the companies regulated by the SEC or the whatever agency they work for, or go to work for the firms themselves. The FDA constantly places people at Pfizer and Merck and the large pharmaceutical companies for a great increase in salary. Until that pipeline is cut off, until regulators have no chance of profiting from their decisions, we're not going to get even decent regulations. So, my opinions. So winners and losers with FTX and that crypto winner. Now I mentioned, maybe losing the CFTC. Just a few weeks ago, they dropped a 74-page bomb on Binance, charging them with all sorts of violations of federal regulations. And this was before they knew about the money laundering. Many of the charges in that statement implied some criminality. I'm not an attorney, so I'm not trying to take, the legal community's place here, but been involved with lawyers and the law for most of my career, securities law primarily, but lying, cheating, and stealing is generally criminal activity. So we might have another huge financial failure to discuss before long. Now, the whole reason for FTX coming up was that the coroner, as I referred to him, John Ray, issued kind of how do I word this? Update on the autopsy. It is kind of an epic tome of stupidity resulting in corporate malfeasance. I mean, even some of the comments he used. Now, Ray has been a administrator for a number of huge bankruptcies. One of them we'll talk about a little later, Enron. But this is the first time I've seen him so verbally abusive of management. And part of the reason why is just the complete, even intentional incompetence of management in managing the business. Ray is having to reconstruct all the records, all the accounts, and he states in his report that he has, quote, never seen such a complete failure of corporate controls and such a complete absence of trustworthy financial information has occurred here. And that's just the start. This report goes on to detail the acts or lack of acts in all of its great, incredible, glorious, unassuming glory. Ray details the difficulty in identifying assets of FTX. And how perfect is that? If you're trying to do an autopsy of a major securities firm, brokerage firm, and you can't even begin to identify who owns what and what happened to the money. There's a reason why he described the approach of FTX's executives, and primarily Sam, Caroline, and Singh. It was a company run by a small group of impish post-adolescents, his words, not mine, who stifled dissent. Impish.
Like devilish?
Like an imp.
Yeah, like a little imp. A mini devil. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, just making sure.
Who stifled dissent, commingled and misused corporate and customer funds, lied to a third party about the business, and joked internally about their tendency to lose track of millions of dollars in assets. Now, remember when I said I wouldn't let a guy that looks like this manage my money? I mean, he's slovenly, but honestly, he looks high. And if somebody wants to partake of illicit substances, that's pretty much their business. I don't care. Just probably wouldn't give them my millions of dollars to manage. But maybe that's just me. Ray goes on to detail this stuff. Wait, have another question here. Hedgehog in space. Is it the beginning of a real event or just grandstanding? Oh, there's so many ways to answer that. I don't think Ray is grandstanding. He is generally a very professional individual. He is not given to words of excess because everything he says comes under a microscope and can be interpreted by other attorneys who are involved in suing that company, et cetera, et cetera. So he normally has to be very discreet in what he's saying. So if he's calling them impish post-adolescents, he's being conservative. He's not grandstanding. Now, is this the beginning of a real event? Obviously, the crypto winter occurred. You know, the prices of all the crypto coins just crashed. And they've started making a little comeback as the securities markets, the stock and bond markets have increased in uncertainty. Now, people tend to remember the stock market or tend to think the stock market has gone up. But if you look at the actual movement of the stock market over the last 3 months, it's just chopping water. It's not really moving up or down, which may be not a good thing. There's, and I've said this for months, I believe a recession, a severe recession is ahead. And so I think the market in the back of its mind understands that. And so there's no real conviction that the bad times are over. Let's go back to the party. There's some serious issues going on. Anonymous, Ray is accustomed to look at companies from the perspective that they were founded to make money in an honest way. FTX was a fraud from the start. Yes, it was. And even, it got its start in the taking advantage of the kimchi premium. We talked about that previously in Korea. Bitcoin sold at a premium, so they could buy Bitcoin in the US market, turn around and sell it for a premium in South Korea. But not only that, they did business in cash. There would literally be people lined up outside of their door with bags of cash waiting to get in for their turn. Their South Korean branch, Alameda at the time, had relations with 200 different banks to process the cash. Now, I don't know about you, but anytime I've seen that much cash flowing and an effort to disperse it so it didn't stand out, it's money laundering. Can't prove it, can't show it, but if you've got another reason why they would operate business in that shape, manner, or form, let me know. I'd be interested to hear it. Now, talking about, Sam's management, the executive staff's management of FTX. And if anybody has any earbuds that don't keep sliding out, I'd be glad to hear about them. Anyway, now remember, Sam owned 90% of the quote unquote hedge fund, Alameda. But he handed the management off to Caroline, who had no business experience, no business.
Sorry, Chunk jumped up on the desk.
Oh, that's okay. You never know what Chunk's going to do. Part of the joy of having a Chunk running around. But she skillfully ran that business in the ground. It's like she's a kamikaze pilot, has a sight on a ship, and she just wants to drive right into it. The whole group was largely incompetent, didn't tolerate dissent. They would fire somebody who complained or who thought they needed better books. Remember, they had 50 different subsidiaries that had 0 records, according to Ray. We knew the record keeping was bad. It not only was bad, it was non-existent. Over 50 subsidiaries had 0 records or bookkeeping. 39 were using QuickBooks or Google Docs to keep track of, or not keep track of, billions of dollars of customer accounts. So combining the two, you've got just intentional ineptness. They would even laugh because sometimes they would discover $50 million that they didn't know they had and go, oh, well, there it is. That happens. They didn't care. They just relished their time in Hollywood and being feted in the press, the media, and talking about, how they were going to save the planet. They issued and spoke of all the right platitudes, and they got pressed for it, which got them more money flowing in. They never had a shortage of money flowing in. And Sam even admitted this was bullshit when he was challenged on it a little later. He admitted that this is what the investors, Hollywood and those politically connected, wanted to hear. So they ate it up. And, is that what you really want in a financial advisor? Do you want platitudes or do you want performance? I could say the same about politicians. Well, we're, currently watching a war on merit. Look at the description of how these companies are handling their perspective, what they deem is most important. Like FTX, it was effective altruism, the goal of helping people. Well, that's a great goal. I love that goal. But what's better at helping people, giving them good jobs, keeping them on the payroll, or blowing millions of dollars at projects no one would support otherwise and losing money and then having the firm go out of business? SVB, for example. There is and can only be one goal in investing, in finance, in making money. I love the movie Jerry Maguire. I don't know if y'all have seen Jerry Maguire, but I love the movie Jerry Maguire because it's a great movie on finance. When you watch it, you'll notice there's one refrain in there. Show me the money. Show me the money. And that's ultimately the bottom line in finance, in business, in investing. You either run a business and it's profitable and you continue to grow, hire people, etc., or you run a business and don't make money and you go out of business. That's it. Those are the two choices, two paths. So if anything takes management's eyes off that goal of being profitable and expanding and growing, I'm against it. So Ray provided numerous examples of Sam's lack of focus. Alameda invested billions, and I think I mentioned, covered this some last time as well. Covered much of this last time as well. Alameda was throwing billions in unprofitable Chinese companies, unknown NFT firms. I think one of them was Yuga Labs, who owns the website Bored Apes. I think I showed you the NFTs, non-fungible tokens. Remember, a non-fungible token is a asset that is standardized. $1 looks like another dollar if you ignore the serial numbers on them. $1 is the same as another dollar. You can't really tell the difference between the two. It's non-fungible. But if I have a work of art, the Mona Lisa, there's only one. Okay. That's non-fungible. Fungible is where they're all the same. Sorry. Fungible is where they're all the same. Non-fungible is where they're unique. So the Mona Lisa would be non-fungible. Doesn't look or isn't the same as anything else. So these little NFTs are unique because they change the color of a monkey's hat. And you go up and look up the website. I showed it to you last time, Bored Apes, and see what people are paying for unique art. Now, Ray's documents from Sam, as I mentioned, according to Ray, his own description is, quote, hilariously beyond any threshold of any auditor being able to even get partially through an audit. So Ray is describing Alameda as unauditable. It's not possible to audit this company. And remember, FTX, Alameda repeatedly represented that they had audited books. Ray talks about how they were only able to ballpark balances and had no transaction histories. So, interesting situation he's in. Ray also has found loans in the millions, tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions to insiders with no documentation, no record of the loan. Sam's family bought property in the Bahamas with a loan, quote unquote, he gave them. And why do companies give loans to employees? Because loans aren't taxable. If they pay interest on it, that's a tax deduction. But if they don't pay interest on it and they never pay back the loan, then it's never taxed. So it makes a nice little way of compensating people until it doesn't. The IRS takes a somewhat dim view of that. Now, and if there's another reason for FTX to be making loans to its executives and family members in the millions of dollars with no documentation, no legal, write-up or contract, let me know. The letter from Ray also details how Alameda had a back door in the computer to FTX's customer funds. So basically, Alameda could go in and withdraw money from your account, without your permission, without you knowing about it, and then spend the money buying Bored Apes. They would make leverage positions, which means they borrow money to buy something. Borrowing. Suppose you have $100 cash, but you want to buy $200 in stock. Well, you can take your $100 cash and borrow $100 from the broker, and you can buy the $200 in stock. But the problem comes in because you have to maintain a certain value of your cash to the total value of the position. You start off 50%, $200 position, $100 in cash. Well, if that $200 worth of stock drops 10%, it's now worth $180. Well, that $20 loss in value comes out of your $100, not the loan, which makes sense. So your cash is now worth $80. So you have $80 in cash to a $180 share value. That has fallen below 50%. So you get what is called a margin call. The broker will call you if this situation arises, you fall below this percentage. So you have to cough up more cash to bring that cash balance up to 50%. Alameda never got those margin calls. It never had to cough up additional cash when its positions were losing. This is mildly illegal. By mildly, I mean highly illegal. So Alameda was the only one that could do it, had a specific exemption from the quote auto liquidation process that applied to every other customer of FTX. And all of this was going on while Sam was tweeting, hey, FTX is completely above board, just like every other broker, regulated just like every other broker, audited like every other broker. In replying to specific question on Twitter about a conflict of interest, Sam would say, Alameda's incentive is just for FTX to do as well as possible. This while Alameda was blowing billions of dollars around the world. Now, even in September, when FTX and Alameda folded, Sam was stating Alameda was a wholly separate entity, ignoring the fact that everybody knew he owned 90% of it. He claimed that all the transactions were arm's length, that he didn't know. And Alameda didn't get different treatment from anybody, which we again know was pretty much bullshit. You can't make this stuff up. I love truth versus fiction because to me, oftentimes the truth is just so much more unbelievable. Ray also in his letter pointed out how other customers were not allowed to trade if they had a negative balance. Negative balance. They have lost more than they have cash. Alameda's accounts were only limited after its negative balance reached 65 billion, not million, billion with a B. This is a firm valued at 40 billion. It had more losses than its total market value. This is just amazing. If you've worked in finance, this is just amazing. Hedgehog. I'm just going to commit a little crime. SBF probably. He has never admitted to doing anything criminal. Now, obviously, he's coming up for trial. I'm not going to prejudge the court or the process, but let's say he's convicted. What we're going to see, my prediction, is that when he comes up for sentencing, he's all sorts of humble about how he screwed up and, is repentant and is sorry and he'll never do it again. So, it amazes me how people kind of change their views and their comments in those few days between the guilty verdict and the sentencing. Interestingly to me also, Ray also shared details the day FTX, this is cool, the day FTX went bankrupt, somebody quote unquote hacked FTX's computers and stole over 400 million. I think it was 432 million in crypto. 432 million in a span of a few minutes. Ray detailed how FTX had no system in place to stop the theft, to detect it, or stop it. Now, how do you hack a computer of a company going bankrupt without repeated attempts? Well, basically, you know the password. Okay. Hack is a rather generous term to imply it was somebody outside the firm. I don't know where the investigation stands, but I'm willing to bet a certain part of my anatomy that it was somebody inside the firm. One of three people, if not a combination of three people. Sam had repeatedly stated that FTX had the latest in security, even using a hot and cold wallet. Hot and cold wallet. What's a hot and cold wallet? A cold wallet is all of your money is at a broker. And that broker, the money is on the company's servers, computers. Well, if those computers are hacked into, somebody can access your account and move your money. It's called cold storage. That's hot storage. Sorry, hot storage. The money's accessible. Sometimes my mind goes a little bit faster than my mouth. It's called hot storage, which, as slow as I speak, that's probably not saying much. So I thought I would go ahead and beat you out of that punch. But if you have cold storage, you have basically something like, it looks like a jump drive. And you literally download your coins on that drive. And so they're not accessible over the internet. They can't be moved, transferred, whatever, without you plugging that back in and entering your password. So you don't have to worry about those being hacked. So a brokerage like Coinbase keeps about, last I saw, 2% of all of its crypto assets in hot storage on its system servers. And it keeps the other 98% in cold storage. It literally has jump drives that have everybody's account, and it unplugs them from the internet unless there's a need for a large transaction. So, cold storage is much safer. And Sam kept saying that FTX utilized that method, cold storage. Another outright lie. Even more interesting is FTX owned a company called LedgerX. And LedgerX is one of the premier makers of cold storage devices. Actually, a very good company. One of the few FTX investments that actually was in a legitimate good company. They tried to get FTX repeatedly to adopt a cold wallet system similar to what they sold. No such system was ever put in place, according to Ray. So far, Ray has recovered about 1.4 billion of crypto and identified another 1.7 billion. Trying to remember how many billions in assets they were managing, but I honestly forget. But 20, 30 billion. So he's recovered, a small portion. If you had assets at FTX, you'll receive pennies on the dollar. It's what really you're looking at. So when all is said and done, I believe, and the audits, the details are still being gathered. But when all's said and done, I believe FTX will rank right up there with Enron, who is also administered by Ray, Bernie Madoff, as one of the largest scams in history, in financial history. All having their own mix of felonies promoted by proponents and, fiction promoted by them. in accomplishing the goal of stealing from innocent people. Only good news about this is it gives Michael Lewis a chance to write another book. And how many of you know who Michael Lewis is? If you haven't read Michael Lewis, go read Michael Lewis. Good author. He actually takes financial events and makes them very readable, almost entertaining, even though they may be tragic. Welcome back, Alan. Are you there? Can't hear you.
Oh, I'm Ellen, not Alan.
That's kind of what I said, but obviously your earbuds aren't working well again.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Liar's Poker. I see you, Anonymous. Liar's Poker, The Big Short, Blind Side, all Michael Lewis books. And Liar's Poker is a good description of how I got my start when I was trading. It was really the glory days of trading. It was hilarious. New Tricks. Didn't he write Moneyball? Yes, he did. Another great book. And it was a really good movie. If you hadn't seen it, it's a really good movie starring Brad Pitt, which I don't know if I have to admit to being a Brad Pitt fan or not, but Fight Club, Fury, Inglourious Bastards, Moneyball, all really good movies. Anyway, can't believe I just said that. So far, most FTX execs have pleaded guilty, but Sam has maintained his innocence. Let's see how that works for him. He's been pretty much sleeping in his parents' house.
Of course he's innocent. Of course he's innocent. I mean, why wouldn't he be? I had no idea
what was going on.
No, with his parents both being lawyers in finance and tax law. Isn't that what they did? Yeah.
Yeah, tax law. They're also professors at Stanford. So I wonder if he's sitting around their house getting high all the time as well. Now that he's not managing money.
Not anymore.
But the trial for FTX begins in October, which probably means LawTube is going to have another heyday. Be some interesting opportunities for LawTube. Both Ian of the Runkle and Law and Lumber.
No.
Lumber and Law.
No. Law and Lumber and Runkle of the Bailey. Not Ian of the Runkle.
Sorry. Okay. Y'all are finding my weakness.
Guys, he cannot remember. I'm sorry. A name.
Like I say, my brain sometimes goes a little bit faster than my mouth can.
No, it's not that. It took him 6 months.
That's my argument. I'm sticking to it.
It took him 6 months to learn our next door neighbor's name. It was, you called her Sarah and Susan and.
Oops, sorry. Technical difficulty there. Whoops, there we go again. I'm going to probably get my ass whooped a little later. Anyway.
You were like my brother who would lock the door and not let me in and drive a little bit and stop it. Anyway, her name is Shelly, and it just never sunk in. I don't know.
Well, let me sum up FTX for you using Ray's own words. He said, while the FTX group's failure is novel in the unprecedented scale of harm it caused to a nascent industry, many of its root causes are familiar: hubris, incompetence, and greed. End of story. So that's what we wanted to try to update you on a few weeks ago in terms of John Ray's interim report on the bankruptcy process of FTX. Thought a good bit of that was somewhat new and interesting. We had alluded to some of it previously, but we didn't have as many details or as much information. We certainly didn't have Ray's opinion like he expressed in that letter, which is to me hilarious. So I thought that was worth your time. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. See, I can raise my hand for a question. Have we figured out where the money went? You may have talked about this already. I may have missed it when I was doing other things. The $1 billion loan that Sam took out right before the bankruptcy.
Don't know exactly where all the loans went or what they're used for. Again, there's no record, so that's one of Ray's major complaints and issues. The auditors are literally having to take one transaction out of millions of transactions, take one transaction at a time and try to follow it to the destination bank. But the problem is, for example, if you have a centralized pool of money and you put in $10 million, well, this pool of money, let's say, is $100 million. So you put $10 million in, and then that pool will send out 100,000 to this account, 1 million to this account, 900,000 to this account. It takes that 10 million and breaks it all up, but it does it inside the pool. And that's how money laundering occurs. It's very, very, very difficult to trace and track. And that's what FTX was doing. So they can see lumps of money going in, but in terms of determining whose money was going to which account, that's very difficult to identify.
Yeah, but Sam admitted, or it is known somehow, verifiable, that he took $1 billion loan out of FTX before they went bankrupt.
Yeah, don't know any of the specifics. That hadn't been released yet. Anonymous, don't forget inside connections to government. I mean, Sam had inside connections to the media, to celebrities, including noted politicians. That's one reason why they grew so much. He played up those connections. He was played up in the press and the media. He got a lot of attention. Still waiting for the New York Times to feature me on their front page, talking about the greatest financial channel on YouTube.
Oh,
but maybe tomorrow.
Subscribe, hit the notifications button, get them all. Apparently there's been an issue with YouTube where they have been unsubscribing people. So check to make sure you're still subscribed if you were subscribed. And Anonymous, I saw your Mrs. Cleavage comment earlier. We got to get subs somehow, He's the brain. I got the boobs. I don't know what else to tell you. What are you doing? What? It's the boob shot. Gotcha.
This is a good night. It's good to see y'all. Not a mouse. It was not a complaint. Yeah, I will say this. Ellen is normally on the modest side of life. Yeah, she's just a sweet spirit.
Oh,
so
thank you.
Now, had a question a while back about, actually, I think it was more about Biden's new policy of the fees for new home mortgages. And let me see if I can call something up here. Where is it? Well, where'd it go?
That's a good question, babe. You ask me that all the time. Where does stuff live?
Ah, I clicked on the wrong one. Come on now. Get.
There we go. All right.
That better? Sorry for the delay.
Can you make
This
it bigger?
is, pardon?
Can you make it bigger? It's kind of hard to see.
Yep, give me a second here.
Oh, thank you, Viking.
Can you see that a little better?
No, not really.
This thing won't expand.
Yeah, it does. There you go. Full screen.
Well, I just did that. It didn't go full screen.
Maybe
that's a little
better.
better. All right. Now, these are the fees charged by FHA on new mortgages. And, whoops. Can't really see them. Damn it. This isn't working out the way I hoped it to, but down here, this bottom row, let's just do this. This bottom row is if you have a FICO score less than 620. Then we want to look at the middle row. If you've got a FICO score of 680 to 699 or 700 to 719. The fees charged by FHA on all eligible loans. If you've got an 80% down payment, your fee originally was 3.25 or 1.5 or 1%. Now, under Biden's new administrative rule, those fees for an 80% down payment go to 2.87, 1.5, 1.25. Okay. So the rates for the bad credit scores drop. The rates for the higher credit scores go up.
So if you don't have money, you have to pay more for your money. And if you have money, you get to pay less.
No, it's just the opposite.
What do you mean?
If you have taken care of your credit, your fee goes up. The percentage interest charged on your loan goes up. The fees you pay to FHA.
If you have a
schedule, if your credit score is bad, if you haven't taken care of your finances and your credit or had some difficulty, your costs go down.
Okay.
So it's penalizing those who have done well and subsidizing those who have done poorly.
That's kind of back-ass words. Sorry.
That again, you know, I oftentimes refer to a war on merit. It's like California, New York, Michigan are all losing people who pay taxes, who are profitable. They're leaving, fleeing those states and going to states with lower tax bases.
So is this like an equity thing?
It's not based on equity, how much cash you put into the
No, I'm not talking about equity as a monetary term. Equality.
Oh, yeah. It's trying to make housing more available to poor people is the goal, which sounds like a noble goal. I mean, a house is the main way people develop wealth. Owning assets, people will take care of them better than they do renting. I'm all in favor of trying to help people buy a house, but doing it via regulation by artificial means, same thing we did in the subprime era. We made loans cheaper to poor people or people who couldn't otherwise qualify for them. And so people started borrowing more and more. And, let's be real, the subprimes didn't end up benefiting poor people alone. There were a lot of doctors, for example, who had pretty good income, but instead of buying 1, 2, or 3 rental houses, they now could buy 10 or 20 rental houses because they would qualify for more loan money. And that's what ended up causing housing prices to soar. You hear people complain because housing prices rise so rapidly. Well, that's because more people are trying to buy them. Or
there are two, okay. So during, I guess it was 2006, when the prices here almost doubled in Wilmington, North Carolina. And then again, this past summer and the summer before, I guess a year ago, housing prices soared again.
Yeah, the value of my property increased about 40% in a year.
So I'm not sure if that's more due to people fleeing other states or if it's more, what caused that?
Well, location is key. In terms of national prices, people aren't fleeing everywhere. They're fleeing from 3 or 4 states to a handful of other states. And, we're down here on the beach, close to the beach. So there's a lot of demand for that property if people are moving down this way from the north. So it's a combination of extremely low interest rates, again, due to Fed policies, and, the work at home era, and a lot of people retiring from, due to COVID. Aging of population, people going ahead and retiring because they're getting older. So it's a combination of factors. But my point is that when the government, tries to produce incentives that the free market wouldn't offer on its own, it generally has unintended consequences. Anonymous, done well, done poorly is too passive a description. Those who have sacrificed and delayed gratification versus those who want to pay now, later, or never. If it's easy, it ain't worth it. I agree. And I know some people have bad luck or have run into difficult problems. It happens. And I hate it for those people. But when you systemically try to, how can I say this? When you make it a matter of law that people who can't afford to pay for a loan can get a loan, you do it to enough people and you're asking for trouble, like we saw in 2008. That was the problem. Rates were so low in 2000, 2001. You had the dot-com bubble. You had the Fed dropping rates after 9/11 to try to keep the economy going. All things they should have done. Now, should they have kept them that low that long? Same thing after the, great financial crisis. They've kept them near zero for a decade, for 12 years. Absolutely ridiculous, in my opinion, but nonetheless, there we are. And it's led to the problems we're having today. So when you force the markets to do things they don't want to do, that usually ends up pretty bad in the long run. It may not have immediate effects, or some of the short-term effects may be good. But everybody ends up hurting.
And because of the 2008 issue crisis, um, my now ex-husband went bankrupt, and they had to drag me in with it. So I refused to even get one of those like pay up front credit cards, nothing. I was just like, I'm not doing it. Um, and 2 years ago, my credit was like 560, and now it's up to 690 something. So it's possible. I mean, it is possible to recover from, I mean, it
Yes, it
seems
is.
devastating, and it is devastating, but you can come out of it.
And there, my point is there is no perfect solution. There's no way to address every situation, every possible problem. But I think over time that the markets generally adapt better than regulators. They are more innovative than regulators if left to their own devices. If there's a way to do something successfully, they'll do it. And that ends up, creating the most prosperous society in history. We have generally great infrastructure, though people are going to argue there's obviously a lot of repairs that need to be made. We've developed the best healthcare system in the world, most advanced, probably the most expensive too, but available education, even though I'm a big critic of the way it's done now. But, prosperity for the nation is far better than poverty for the nation. Quad A, apartment rent is as high or higher than a mortgage monthly payment here in California and here in our town.
Yep.
You get so many people moving in, and you've got limited area. You've got limited areas.
Sorry.
No, go
ahead. I'll
interrupt
you some more if you want.
It's all right.
We thought about selling when earbuds. When the prices here got to where it was a great time to sell, we'd make a ton of money, but the rent was higher than the mortgage. So it's like, and there's nowhere to go. So what do you do? So we just were like, well, we'll just stay here.
And, I like where I live, but I'm at the point where I'd like to simplify. And so, was really seriously thinking about selling it. But where I would end up, I'd drive an hour to work. Didn't want that. And I'd be paying more in rent than my house payment. Didn't want that. So didn't end up doing anything. But the idea is that, like in California, part of the problem in a lot of those cities is rent control. Rent control is a great thing if you're in one of the prime apartments and get your rent locked. But what it does to new development, it kills new development. So the maintenance on the buildings decreases, and any new development grinds to a halt because the profit potential is very limited. Prices on the homes in the area generally skyrocket. So you've got soaring prices because accessibility is limited. And the people who have the cheap rent aren't giving up the apartments. They don't need to buy a house because their rent ends up being far cheaper than their mortgage would be. So it's a catch-22. Again, unintended consequences of regulations. And several of you are commenting on the same thing. Apartment rent in Arizona is higher than mortgages too. Rents in Connecticut have been ridiculous and rising for the last 10 years. Hedgehog. Best doctors, worst paperwork overhead. I remember when I was in the hospital in London, was there for a whole day with a head trauma. And when I was leaving, I asked, if they wanted me to pay for it. And they said, no, it's too much paperwork. So they didn't even keep a file on me. I just walked out the door.
Wait, head trauma? Brentwood. That's what happened to you. That explains so much.
So much, yeah. I guess I set that one Um, Brentwood, rent is crazy in Tennessee too. Yeah, and a lot of this is because people have been fleeing to states like North Carolina, Tennessee, Texas. California has had a lot of flight, and the average home price, for example, in the San Francisco area is down 30%. But I think that also is probably pretty selective in certain areas. So it's...
Wait, Anonymous, are you in Wilmington?
You drive 45 minutes now, depending on the traffic in Monkey Junction, 15 miles of stop and roll. Good thing about my job is I can be a little bit pickier about the times I go in. So I try to avoid that. And for those of you that don't know, Monkey Junction, we've got a major intersection that used to be just a gas station. It was out in the woods in the country or whatever. And the gas station actually had a monkey there.
A little monkey.
Kept in a cage, but it would run around the store sometimes and, play with the people getting gas. And so that intersection came to be known as Monkey Junction. And now that whole little area, neighborhood, it's obviously developed, is now known as Monkey Junction. But every time I pass that station, I still wish they had a monkey, even though that was 30 years ago.
All right. You may know her brother. Who's your brother? Anonymous? Please tell me.
Want to be careful about personal information.
Well, she can send it to me some way.
Just don't want, the New York Times blowing somebody's cover here. Because I know they're going to feature us on the front page here before long. All right. So I think that was, kind of addresses one of the questions that we had. And we do try to answer your questions as best we can. Want to have a few comments here on the banking crisis in process. And yes, I do describe it as a banking process. Banking crisis. We saw and we talked about, had a discussion on SVB. Well, last weekend, another major bank was taken over, the second largest regional bank in the country, First Republic, was taken over by the FDC, which basically means they went bankrupt. Their stock and bonds are worth nothing or worthless. It was taken over after it lost 1/2 of its deposits. And I'm trying to remember, I think it had... I don't remember the exact amount, so I won't say it. But it lost 1/2 of its deposits. And remember, a bank isn't designed to lose money. It doesn't handle losses well. And part of that is due to the makeup of the bank. If we look at what's been happening with bank deposits, okay, here you see kind of the normal activity and range of bank deposits. Even after the 9/11, you see the drop in bank deposits in the subprime crisis as people got scared of their banks failing and moved their money out of banks.
Hey, Clay.
Well, here you see some interesting activity. And remember, this chart goes back to...
Be cognizant of the arrows.
Am I getting a bunch of arrows? Yeah. Damn it.
Yeah.
Sorry. I've, really got to try to figure out a cure to that. I honestly don't know. But this chart goes back to about 1970. And you get an idea of the range. But if you look on the far right-hand side, you see some interesting activity. You see deposits soar. And this is basically from the COVID stimulus and the additional subsidy payments. Remember, during COVID, the government paid people not to work. We knew a young man that was making I don't know, $8 an hour, working 30 hours a week. So he was making, taking home 180 bucks a week. He got paid $900 a week by the government for over a year to not to work. So don't ask me how badly that irritated me. But anyway, so you see bank deposits soar with this kind of stimulus payments. And then what's happened in the meantime? You see an incredibly sharp, steep decline. Greatest, deepest contraction of bank deposits in history ever.
I'm a 12-year-old. When it says deepest contraction ever, I'm like, have you ever had a child? Really? Sorry.
Deepest, not longest.
I'm just saying.
I've had 5 kidney stones. So I've given birth to like a kidney stone that was like this big and had spikes coming out all over it. So I'm going to argue that's worse than having babies.
Contraction? No. Sorry.
Yes.
Watermelon, lemon.
Spikes. Bowling ball.
Sorry. No.
Now, also, let me show you this. And you probably have a hard time seeing this. I actually think this is one of the coolest graphs that I have seen in a while. I'll try to blow it up a little bit here. All right, I hope you can make that out a little bit better. Let me just go full screen on it. This is a fascinating pie chart to me, one, because of the way it's cut up. It shows you the composition of banking assets in the country, as well as banking liabilities. Remember, when, excuse me, when you make a deposit at a bank, the bank owes you that money. So that's a liability to the bank. They take your money and they either make a loan with it or they buy bonds. Those are their assets. Cliff Notes version. And so and you'll notice their liabilities hopefully are always smaller than their assets. That's part of the glory of this. And there's all the damn cursors. If I reach over and point to my screen, is that better?
No, they can't see that.
Yeah, I know. But I'm like, I got to be a better way. Anyway, I don't know why that affects me. Cheap cursor, cheap mouse, I don't know. But liabilities, the yellow part. You can see that deposits make up about 15.3 billion. Actually, that should be trillion. I found an error already. Anyway, because this is all banks in the country. So this is an average, not any specific bank. Well, when those deposits run, then the bank has this cash assets and trading assets to try to cover that balance. Remember, if you want your cash, the bank has to sell assets to give you your cash, particularly if you're a large depositor. So if 3 or 4 trillion is leaving a bank, they are out of liquid cash. So once this liquid part starts getting down so low, they have to go down and sell some of their other assets. They may have to sell even some of these securities that are quote unquote held to maturity. A bank can have 2 different types of assets, available for sale or held to maturity. And the accounting, it's an accounting nuance put in after the subprime crisis. The available for sale, the bank has to mark to market. Now, the Federal Reserve has raised rates. And if you remember, we talked about the teeter-totter for bonds being representative of bonds. If interest rates rise, the price of the bonds fall, and vice versa. So as the Fed has hiked rates, the value of the bonds have fallen. And the longer the bonds, the longer that teeter-totter, and the more volatility you get. I feel like I'm a crazy guy here. The more volatility, the more price movement you get in the value of those bonds. So if they have deposits leave, interest rates have risen, the value of their bonds has fallen. They're having to sell these bonds and take a loss. Not only that, they don't raise as much money. So they have to take some of this other money that's held to maturity down here at the bottom in the 50 hands and sell it. Well, it hasn't been marked to market, but it's got the same losses, maybe even larger losses, because it may be a longer maturity bond. So if they have to start selling some of that, their losses get bigger. And that's what happened to First Republic. It lost half of its deposits. So if this graphic was just talking about First Republic, they lost nearly 7.5 trillion in assets, half of in deposits. I'm sorry, 7.5 trillion in assets. Well, they only had 4.8 total in cash. So they would have had to destroy all of their cash plus go into their held to maturity. The thing about this First Republic versus SVB, a lot of people said SVB was unique, that it wasn't a systematic issue. It was just unique to that bank because of its unusual circumstances. Well, First Republic is an issue, a problem that is hitting every bank. Every bank. So this is more of a systemic problem. And this has a lot of fairly intelligent people worried, because what you're seeing is a classic bank run where people are moving their deposits from low paying deposits in banks to higher paying deposits in money markets or treasury bills. It's called a flight to yield. Now, Anonymous, when does the systemic cascade start? That's a good question. I don't know if it hasn't already started, because we've seen a ton of money leaving banks, and banks are struggling. Remember, the Fed just came up a couple of weeks ago with a new credit line for banks who needed to borrow to cover some of these deposit withdrawals. And literally overnight, they lent out $400 billion. I don't know what the total is now, but banks jumped on that like pockets on a shirt. I mean, they couldn't get enough. You know how girls get excited when they have pockets in dresses? Banks were like, this is great. Yeah.
They should make, but listen, women don't have enough pockets, especially when they have children, for pacifiers and all the things that we have to carry with us, and lipsticks and blah, 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 blah. Anyway.
True.
Sidebar.
But it's funny. Even my daughter, when she was little, she would buy a dress with pockets. She would be so excited with her pockets. She would stick her hands in, kind of show them off, pull her hands out to the side and show off her pockets. She was just excited. So I can't tell you when the full effect will hit, but I don't have much doubt it's coming, and we're not there yet. So that's a big risk. And it's not only the flight to safety. That's a problem. It's real estate. Now, we were just talking about, home prices. If we look at First Republic's construction of their assets, they had over 80% of their loans in real estate, both home real estate and commercial real estate. Well, now, most of that real estate, or a lot of that real estate, was in California, where the prices have dropped 30%. So when prices of homes drop that much, generally people stop paying, or they've lost their jobs, whatever, and they start turning the houses back into the banks. That's just beginning. Commercial
we got
real
a
estate.
question.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I'm getting there. This one is a good one,
Hedgehog.
though. You should read that, but I have another question.
10 fingers plus 10 toes plus 20 spikes.
Giving birth.
Oh.
Point. $1 a hedgehog.
I can tell this is a debate I will not win, so I will just bow out gracefully. But I will say,
go ahead.
I will say I've known women that have had babies and kidney stones. They'd all rather have the babies.
At least you get something out of a baby.
Diapers. College tuition.
Next question.
Do you recommend taking the flight to safety or keeping money where it is? Right now, I'm always in favor of protecting your downside. So if you think you're if you've got money that's not insured over $250,000 at a regional bank or small bank, I would seriously consider moving it to, short-term treasuries. You can tell your bank you want to take your money and put it, to get your short-term treasury, or transferring it to a money market instrument that invests in short-term treasuries and agency securities.
Clay has mentioned before that he kind of cashed out.
Yeah. I moved into cash probably about a year ago because I thought the Fed would start hiking. They actually didn't hike for several months, so I didn't time it perfectly. You never time it perfectly. But I just felt like risk in the system was growing. And, I try to avoid the 20, 30%. I can't get every 5% fluctuation. Just nobody's timing is that good. But I've been pretty good at avoiding the 10, 20, 30% drops. And, that's what I was kind of expecting. And I still kind of expect it. Now, it hadn't happened like I figured it would. There've been a whole lot of other issues going on. But, I'm getting 5.5% right now, relatively risk-free. So that's better to me than risking a 20 or 30% drop, because when the market drops, it drops rapidly. So take the savings and move it to a money market account. Now remember, if you're in a FDIC insured account, it's insured to $250,000. So if you have more than $250,000 deposited at a bank, you can move it, divide it up to another bank or transfer it to a treasury or a money market. Yes. Anonymous. Why not restate the 100K insurance? All else is at risk. I think the insurance by the FDIC is $250,000. Mm-hmm. All else is at risk. Maybe the market will sort out an answer besides going to Uncle Sugar. Everybody's so hooked on Uncle Sugar, I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. There's so much pressure on Powell to go back to stop QT and go back to QE, the offering free money, the low interest rates, ZIRP, zero interest rate policy, ZIRP, as I refer to it, that, he's putting up a good fight. And some people say, he's making banks insolvent. I can't argue that. It's easy for me to say he's hiked too fast. I don't think he's hiked too far, because this is actually historically where rates need to be. But he's done it awful fast, and he's put a big shock in a system that wasn't used to managing risk. Look at SVB. No risk management, no concern for risk. They had free money coming in. They were guaranteed profits by the Fed, basically. They just didn't worry about risk. First Republic, no hedging, didn't hedge any of their risk. In fact, I saw a study the other day saying that less than 6% of all bank assets are hedged. Now, hedged, that's like obtaining insurance. You own a house. You know, you may have $1,000 deductible, but if your house is a $500,000 house, if a hurricane came and blew it apart, you wouldn't want to cough up $500,000 to replace it. So you carry insurance. You've hedged that. You pay a premium and you've obtained insurance. Well, that's really what I mean with hedging in terms of financial assets. There's things you can do where you pay a premium and obtain some coverage if the markets move against you. Anonymous, if the market is avoided, then we'll always be looking for that best way to game the system other than maximizing returns by actually creating wealth. And that's been the problem for 10 or 12 years, is certain industries, banking primarily, have been favored. Financial assets have been favored. So capital flowing into like manufacturing, agriculture has dropped. People don't invest or haven't invested in that because it's not as profitable and it's far more risky than financial assets. So you've seen kind of a manipulation of capital flows from general areas of the economy to more specific areas, tech and financial. And I mean, you've seen companies like Apple, the FANG group, Apple, Amazon, Google, take off while the rest of the market has been pretty stagnant. The vast majority of the movement in the market over the past couple of years has been in the FANG group: Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google. You take those five out of the S&P 500 and it's either flat or hasn't moved over the last 5 years.
Is Facebook still Facebook in the market, or is it Meta?
It's Meta now. So it'd be Mang instead of Fang. F-A-N-G. It's now Mang. Meta. Gotcha. Who came up with that name?
Who do you think?
Same one that came up with the Bud Light ad.
No. Whoa, Lord. Let's not even go there.
Yeah, that's been a disaster for Budweiser. But now, commercial real estate. That's what I was talking about. Commercial real estate. First Republic had about 25 to 30% of its assets in commercial real estate, which commercial real estate is getting hammered. And I'll show you kind of an interesting picture. Right here is a picture of cell phone activity in downtown San Francisco, you know, based on the towers. These are
like the hands.
Oh, geez. And if you look over on the far right, the last entry is San Francisco. And it shows that San Francisco has 31% of the downtown cell phone activity that it had prior to COVID. What this means is people are no longer working downtown San Francisco. So the office space there is not being used. Right now, the vacancy rate in San Francisco is, I believe it's around 65%. But keep in mind, a lot of that is still leases that the companies are paying for space they're not using, but the employees aren't there. So as soon as those leases expire, they're not going to renew them. Now, if you have commercial real estate loans, you're going to get hammered because the vacancy rate, like I say, nationally is 30%. In Boston, it's already 50-something%. You can't make money if you're not 90% leased, normally. So anything below 90%, you're losing money. Again, lenders don't handle losses well. And so you've got a listing of all the, not all, but a number of major cities. And if we look at Los Angeles, 65%. Milwaukee, 71%. Chicago, 50%. Philadelphia, 47%. Portland, 37%. These are devastating numbers for banks who have not yet written off those loans or taken the losses, but they're coming. And that's why, I still think it's going to get worse. Because once these loans start folding and defaulting, banks are going to start folding. Anonymous, does that cell phone activity discount for the 911 calls for assault by the homeless? That would be kind of funny if it wasn't so true. In a lot of these cities that have the extremely low usage, San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, the homeless problem is just insane. That is not an insignificant factor in people not wanting to work downtown anymore in major cities. Particularly when cities go to cashless bonds, defund the police, etc. Crime is spiking all over. So would you want to work in that environment? I used to go to the Bay Area a lot. I'm talking 4 to 5 times a year for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. Know the area well. Love the area. It's a beautiful part of the world. Well, I went there, I don't know, 3 years ago, 4 years ago.
5 years ago.
A friend, and wouldn't take a car because you have to park it on the street. And the homeless people will just walk up and down the streets, and if they see a car, they may bust out the window and try to steal whatever's inside. The police don't care. Police will drive right by them and keep on going. You'll see people defecated in the Mission area and over by Chinatown, etc. You'll see people defecating on the streets. Nobody wants to work in those areas. And I believe I even showed this a few weeks ago, a poop map.
Yeah, you did.
Do you remember that? Yeah.
Yes.
It's gotten so bad.
Actually, a map.
Yep. And if you zoom in on it, you can see thousands and thousands of places where people have defecated publicly on the street that the city has had to go clean up. So it's just an absolute mess in these cities. It is just grotesque what is going on in a lot of these major cities. And yes, KP, Chunk is a super cute pup. He is a handful, but he is a super cute pup.
He was getting jealous. He likes to be on camera. And he was like, Mom, come on. You got to pick me up. We got to do this. So, but now he's got his bully stick again. So they're both right under my feet.
Yeah, if y'all want to be entertained, get your dog a bully stick. We won't tell you what it is, but
oh, no.
Bully stick. Don't Google that.
No, but you can go on your channel and look up the Chunk video. It's a really cute little short because he talks in that video, and he does that like 24/7 nonstop. He talks.
He is one of the talkingest dogs. He will look at you and just talk to you, just like he is literally communicating. It's hilarious.
He thinks.
Anonymous. People of California voted for this to be this way and deserve to get it. Good and hard. I have my 50 rules for life, and rule number 2 is stupid should hurt. You make consistently stupid choices, you're gonna hurt for them. Ideas have consequences. Viking Wolf. I worked for theft claims for Southern Cal during COVID. The amount of claims was insane, more than we could handle as a team. These areas are going berserk. You see Walmart, CVS, a lot of companies are just shutting down in these areas because they're constantly being robbed. And I mean, not just like losing a few items. You have groups of people come in, break everything, just clean out the shelves and take anything of value. And the police do nothing.
The worst part too is, I mean, even during the shipping issues where they, couldn't get to the ports and they were backed up and all this stuff, all the trains were getting robbed when they
Yeah.
stopped in California. They were just getting looted. I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah. People are just, I grew up in an area where we could, in summer months, stay out after dark and we'd be over a neighbor's house playing kick the can or doing something. And, I was talking with Ellen and some other people, a little while back. If you have kids, you wouldn't allow them to stay out after dark or go riding their bikes 5 miles to the park and play ball all day and then, come back when it starts getting dark. Just wouldn't do it in most cities nowadays.
Now we had the
It's
street light
just
rule.
do what?
We had the street light rule. When the street lights come on, you need to come home.
Yeah. We just, we had to be home by dark. Didn't even have cell phones. It was a wild era.
It was a safe
But
era. I mean, we had the candy lady and the popsicle lady, two opposite sides of our neighborhood. And we just, as little kids, we just walked in and got our popsicles and said, hey, to Dot. And then we'd go to the candy lady and say, hey, candy lady. And she'd give us candy. And it's just so different.
yeah, you could go to the ice cream truck and hand him cash, and he wouldn't ask if you wanted, a dime or nickel bag. He would ask what flavor.
I would quote Eddie Murphy here, but I'm not going to. Or is it not Eddie Murphy?
George Carlin.
No, somebody knows what I'm talking about. Ice cream man's coming. Ice cream man's coming. Not Bill Cosby. The other one.
The other one. Don't know,
Somebody
but I will
knows.
say this: it's always okay to quote Carlin on this channel. Carlin
It
was
is.
just
It is.
almost nonstop gold.
Eddie, I got ice
But
cream. You didn't get none because you ain't got no money. Mom ain't got no teeth. Oh, sorry. I did it.
Eddie Murphy,
Richard Pryor. Yes, that's what I
Richard
was
Pryor.
thinking of. Yes.
Yeah, I remember Richard
I
Pryor.
think both did.
He had this one
You
routine
saw
about giving
well.
CPR,
Uh-huh.
and he would talk about why he would never give CPR to somebody
Mm-hmm.
because he did it in the abdominal Richard Pryor style. He was like, because death, it eased down your lung too. And that always stuck with me. Obviously, I worked in medicine and surgery going through school, and would often, be involved in giving CPR. And every time I was sitting there thinking about death eased down your lung too. But anyway, all right. So
That was kind
commercial
of
real estate is
funny.
at a huge risk right now. If I look at estimates from Morgan or Goldman, they're predicting a peak to trough of 30 to 40% decline in prices. Also of interest is that half of the outstanding commercial real estate loans will reprice over the next 2 years. There's about $4 trillion in real estate loans, about $2 trillion is going to reprice. Now, commercial real estate loans oftentimes roll over and, have been for the past 12 years at very low rates. Well, interest rates have risen by 400 or 500 basis points, 4 or 5%. So a lot of companies aren't going to be able to refinance them. If they do refinance them, their costs are going to quadruple in terms of their interest payments, or even more. So what does this mean for renters? It means rent's going to continue to, leases are going to continue to increase in cost. It just has a number of repercussive effects. Anonymous. Cocaine is God's way of telling you that you have too much money. I have actually seen that in real life. So regional banks own about 70% of all commercial loans. And that's kind of an interesting number because, well, let's see if I can get it working. Hate it when my computer doesn't cooperate.
It's user error.
I saw this tweet the other day, and it's from Kobayashi letter, but they went back and looked up the small bank share of commercial real estate in 2008, which wasn't all that long ago, but which was, devastating for banks with the real estate failures. They had 54% of commercial real estate loans. Now they've got 70%. So huge increase in the amount of commercial real estate being held by commercial banks. If we look at, some commonalities between SVB and First Republic, main commonality is just risk management, poor risk management, no risk management. For one, SVB, they never considered risk. For First Republic, they almost never considered risk, had no hedging in place. Banks aren't used to managing risk because of the rules and regulation and the low interest rate loans. It was good times. But the collapse of First Republic due to the flight to yield and the collapsing loan portfolio, that is systemic. People aren't saying the same things that they did when SVB collapsed, that it was unique, that it was particular to SVB's unique circumstances. This is a problem that is affecting a number of banks. ZIRP, the low interest rate policy, created a real estate bubble and a bond bubble. Remember, interest rates go down, bond prices go up. Well, now interest rate prices have risen, so bond prices have collapsed. I looked a while back up a 30-year Treasury bond issued in May at 1.75% for 30 years. Now, I don't know who's stupid enough to lend somebody money at 1.75% for 30 years, but people bought it. It was now worth 50 cents on the dollar, or was as of a month ago. Just insanely stupid. It is systemic. There are huge losses in banks' portfolio, both with loans and securities, their bonds. So banks face huge losses and a flight of deposits. In a perfect world, you would expect or hope to see where the Fed could raise rates to weaken loan demand. And that's why it raises rates. It wants to slow down growth in the economy. And, businesses and individuals will borrow money to build houses and to expand new plants, whatever. So by slowing that down, the Fed can slow growth in the economy. That's the idea behind raising rates. So in a perfect world, the Fed would be able to raise rates, decrease loan demand, but not cause banks to become insolvent. We don't live in a perfect world. Long story short, we don't live in a perfect world. Now, not a mouse. Commercial real estate appraisers will be skittish on evaluations too, lowering values based on demand. That'll make it harder also for people to borrow because they get a lower appraisal. They'll need they won't be able to get the size loan they need to afford the house if the appraisal is way below the loan amount or the purchase price. Bankers normally won't make that loan. So there's some issues out there. I know we're running, we've about hit our 9 o'clock limit. If we lived in a perfect world, I would be married to Chris Hemsworth. And what's her name? Molly Cyrus could write another song about you or do a video about you. Was it
Miley Cyrus? What? Huh? Huh?
Yeah. She used to date Hemsworth, and then who was the girl at the bow and arrow?
She was married,
she was married to Liam. Sorry. She was married to Liam, and then he divorced, and he's dating, who's the girl with the bow and arrow that did the competition? Made 4 or 5. Jennifer Lawrence.
If y'all have not seen Jennifer Lawrence, her bit on Jimmy Fallon where she went and asked everybody if they knew Jennifer Lawrence and if they could name 5 movies Jennifer Lawrence was in. I mean, she's asking people on the street and they're like, I don't know who she is. She's like, Jennifer Aniston is great. I mean, it was so funny. Check it out. Hilarious.
But she started dating Liam, and Molly, she wore like a gold dress to a gala or something with him. It was, photos all over the place. So Miley does a song about him, and she's wearing the same gold dress dancing around. It's Taylor Swift-esque.
And Donna Mouse, of course, you saw her porn video. That's just, we expect no less from you. Why not?
But we, we are winding down. Won't get to Enron tonight. Maybe that's just a sign from the Almighty that Enron, doesn't need to be covered. But we really appreciate y'all being here.
I think we should do like an Enron video, and then maybe y'all let us know an Enron video, and then maybe an what's the other one? Madoff.
Oh, there's a bunch of them.
Madoff video.
Bernie Madoff. I regret he was imprisoned about 90 miles from here for several years when I first moved to the area. And I thought about going up and trying to visit him and see if he would grant me an interview. But I never did. And then he died. And,
you should have called me, Clay, back then, because my uncle was there too. So he was FBI. So
I thought he was in prison too. Was he in prison?
Yeah, at Butner.
Oh, we could have just had a grand old time at Butner.
We could have had a party of it.
So, Anonymous, my secretary's son was his cellmate, said he was nice. I heard that, he was always a nice guy on the street. Very personable when he wanted to be.
Okay. Did we miss the part where Anonymous's secretary's son was his cellmate, and then my uncle was there and Bernie was there, and yeah, it's like a big old family.
Yeah, like I said, how y'all doing? Just a family affair here. But seriously, we appreciate y'all joining us tonight. Enjoyed it. Y'all are great company on a Saturday night.
Subscribe, do the YouTube things, hit the notification.
Tell your friends, bribe them, threaten them, beat them.
Yes, please.
I'll probably get yeeted off YouTube for that.
We got brains and boobs, so we're all good, right?
Maybe we need to change the name of the channel to Brains and Boobs.
Hey, why not? It might help.
Y'all, thank you very much. Y'all go and love your families. Have a good night. Take care of yourselves. And we will see y'all again sometime soon.
Definitely on Saturday.
Was anonymous. Clay, get Rob to let you sit in on his Friday frenzy.
You've got to get Rob to let Clay sit on his Friday frenzy.
If he's willing to lower his standards, if he wants friends in low places, I'm his Huckleberry.
No doubt. All right, guys. Good night.
Good night to all. Blessings to you. Thank you.